my argument would be about infrastructure and the importance in the next 3 to 5 years of the federal government spending much more money on infrastructure and the importance of building roads and schools and broadband. We cannot maintain our place competitively unless we do. And I think it will create jobs, it will add to the economy, and it's not going to add to the long-term debt.
Listen, investment in infrastructure is our salvation as a state, right? I mean, we have this enormous built-in economic advantage as a state. We have this proximity to the massive economic financial market in New York, as well as the major economic hub in Boston. And yet, increasingly, specifically with respect to New York, we can't get businesses to locate in Connecticut because they can't get goods and people to that market. And so it is going to be my obsession as a U.S. Senator from Connecticut to unlock that pathway to New York. And you're right. This is sort of the holy grail of federal investment, because in the short run it puts a whole mess of people back to work, and in the long run it allows us to regain a historic competitive advantage that we used to have against the rest of the world. And here's why we don't have it any longer. The United States spends 3% of its GDP on infrastructure. Europe, even given all of its budget troubles, spends twice that much, 6% of its GDP on infrastructure. You go to Europe and you can get on a high-speed train anywhere. Here, you can't find one anywhere. China, though, China spends 12% of its GDP on infrastructure, 4 times as much money as the United States government does. No wonder they are growing. Now, listen, they've got a lot of other advantages, but no wonder they are growing at the rates they are. Just sort of give you a little reference here in Connecticut, we have a 30-30-30 plan here in Connecticut when it comes to rail. We think that it's not out of the realm of possibility that we can get rail times down to 30 minutes from Hartford to New Haven to Stamford, Stamford to New York City. If we could do that, think about what it would mean to Bridgeport, for instance, to shorten, to essentially take the time it takes today to get from Stamford to New Haven, Stamford to New York City, and make that time available 20 years from now from Bridgeport to New York City. That would mean that all the businesses that invested in Stamford all of a sudden going to have a lot of the same reasons to do so in Bridgeport. So this is it's a job creator, and for Connecticut, maybe more so than any other state, it's a huge part of the story of our economy.
Call up David Barber and Donald Sibestini, and while we wait for them to come up, we'll take a question from Twitter, which asks, Rich asks, why is reducing Fed budget by around 2% something that you do not support? Should we tax and spend rather than make cuts?
So yeah, we asked for a bunch of questions through social media, by the way. I hope that people do not follow me on Facebook or on Twitter. I hope they do. I do most of my own postings on social media, so you're hearing from me directly. So I do support reducing the federal budget. I've called for a 1% reduction across the board in discretionary spending. I worry that as you get into the 2% range right now, amidst a quivering economic recovery, that you could halt that recovery. But I think the 2% number sort of comes from sequestration. And actually that number this year for most federal agencies is closer to about 8%. So this year, most of the federal agencies that are subject to sequestration are going to have to spend 8% less. That is absolutely going to have a major effect on our economy. Now, economists debate whether it's going to have a 1/4 or 1/2% impact on GDP, or whether it's going to have a full percentage impact on GDP, but it'll be big. And I've said for a number of years that we should be doing annual 1% reductions in overall discretionary spending. I just think we want to time, and ultimately maybe we will have to get to the point where we're doing 2% or 3% or something bigger. I just think right now, as we're just sort of getting this economy back on track, it's dangerous to go too deep too soon. And you'd be surprised that when we have real conservative economists that came out of the Bush administration, they say the same thing. And they say, we're all for cutting the size of government. We just think you should do it in a way that's timed such that you don't stop this recovery, which is real, in its tracks.